Welcome to Infidelity Nest. In today's video, the late afternoon sun drifted lazily through the kitchen window, its golden glow settling over every surface like a warm, familiar blanket. Dust particles floated in the still air, shimmering like tiny suspended stars as they moved in and out of the light. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that followed a long, exhausting morning, soft, fragile, and strangely comforting. Laura stood at the counter with a damp cloth in her hand, moving in a slow, practiced rhythm she knew so well she could do it even with her eyes closed. Every swipe of the cloth followed years of habit, a lifetime of routines she never paused long enough to question. At 42, she carried herself with a gentle confidence, the type that came from years of putting others first. Yet behind her composed posture, beneath her steady breath, a tiredness clung to her, an exhaustion not just from today, but from countless days before it. Her back ached in that deep, lingering way that didn't come from a single moment of strain, but from years of doing, lifting, supporting, and being everything for everyone. Laura had learned to hide her tiredness well. She smiled when she needed to, said she was fine when asked, and carried on, even when her body begged for a pause. She wasn't the type to complain. She wasn't the type to slow down. She was the glue that held everything together. Mark, her husband of almost 2 decades, spent most of his days managing multiple construction sites. His life moved from one location to another: blueprints, measurements, heavy machinery, and constant demands. He left early, came home late, and carried the smell of sawdust and sun wherever he went. Their teenage children, Ethan and Lily, were whirlwinds of energy, unpredictability, and endless needs. Ethan was in the middle of battling deadlines, unfinished assignments, and the emotional storms that came with being 15. Lily, energetic and expressive at 13, bounced between soccer practice, art projects, and school drama as if the world never slowed down. Their schedules collided with Laura's days from morning to night: rides, reminders, quick meals, and quick decisions. Through all of this, Laura stayed steady. She was the anchor, the person who ensured the house didn't collapse under the weight of daily chaos. That Saturday morning had started like so many others before it. She woke up before the sun, moving quietly so she wouldn't disturb anyone still sleeping. The smell of brewing coffee filled the kitchen, a smell she relied on to push her through the early hours. She prepared breakfast, reminding herself to keep it simple because there was no time for anything elaborate. She drove Lily to her soccer game, cheering with a warm smile despite the dull ache already building in her shoulders. She answered a call from Ethan's teacher about a missing assignment, reassuring them she would talk to him. She stopped at the grocery store, moving through aisles with the efficiency of someone who had memorized every item, every brand, every price. By the time she walked through the front door again, arms full of grocery bags and her keys still dangling from her fingers, it felt like she had lived an entire day already. Her body wasn't simply tired, it was drained, both inside and out. She set the bags down and let out a quiet breath, the kind that only escaped when she was alone. It wasn't just the physical tasks. It was the weight of always being needed, always being responsible, always being the one who noticed the little things. She heard footsteps from the backyard before she saw him. Mark stepped into the kitchen, brushing sawdust from his hands and shirt. He looked like he carried the sun with him, the warmth of it, the brightness of it. He leaned against the door frame and studied her carefully. That was something he didn't do often enough lately. Really look at her. His gaze lingered longer than usual, taking in her posture, the way her shoulders slumped, the faint tension around her eyes. "You're sore again, aren't you?" he asked, his voice lower than usual, touched with something like concern. Or maybe guilt. Laura gave him the smile she had perfected over the years. The one that reassured him, the one that told him she was okay even if she wasn't. "Just tired," she said, brushing off the ache as she always did. "It's been a long week." He took a few slow steps forward, closing the distance between them until he stood right behind her. She felt his presence before he touched her, the warmth radiating from him, the familiar scent of wood and sweat and outdoor air. He rested his calloused hands on her shoulders, and even though his touch was gentle, she felt the roughness of his work against her skin. "Come sit down," he murmured, guiding her toward a chair. "Let me help." For a heartbeat, she hesitated. She wasn't used to being cared for. She wasn't used to stopping, to letting someone else take over, even for a moment. But something in his tone softened her resistance. She sat, placing her hands loosely in her lap as Mark moved behind her. His thumbs pressed gently into the knots near her shoulder blades, and she inhaled sharply. Not from pain, but from the sudden release of tension she hadn't realized she was holding. His touch surprised her, not because he wasn't affectionate. Mark had always been warm, steady, dependable, but because it had been a long time since he had taken the time to notice the quiet aches she carried. His hands moved slowly, carefully, as if he was trying to erase weeks of exhaustion in a matter of minutes. Each motion unraveled a layer she had kept tightly wound around herself. Her breathing deepened, her eyes fluttered closed. For the first time in what felt like ages, her body allowed itself to relax. "You're actually good at this," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could hold them back. Mark chuckled softly. "Guess working with my hands pays off for more than building things." The sound of his laugh stirred something inside her. Familiar, warm, almost forgotten. She smiled, her expression softening into something fragile but sincere. His hands continued their gentle work, and she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just about the massage. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long while. It was the realization that she mattered too, even when she tried to convince herself otherwise. When his hands finally stilled, Laura opened her eyes and turned slightly in the chair, looking up at him. There was a moment, quiet, unspoken, delicate, where their eyes met, and she felt the weight of everything they had been too busy to say. They had allowed life to pull them apart little by little, not intentionally, but naturally, quietly. Yet here, in the soft light of their kitchen, they found each other again in the simplest of ways. "You might have just saved my day," she said softly. Mark reached forward and brushed a strand of hair away from her face, his thumb grazing her cheek. "Good," he whispered. "You deserve that." That evening, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Ethan walked into the living room and paused when he saw his parents sitting together on the couch. They weren't arguing. They weren't distracted. They weren't busy. They were laughing. Not polite laughter, not forced politeness, but the kind of laughter that came easily, naturally, from a shared memory. Laura's head rested lightly on Mark's shoulder, and his arm held her close in a subtle but unmistakable gesture of affection. Ethan froze, surprise flickering across his face. He hadn't realized how much he had missed seeing his parents like this, connected, gentle, at peace. For months, the house had felt tense without anyone saying it out loud, as if something invisible lingered in the air. But now, watching them, he felt something loosen inside him, something calm, something reassuring. Moments later, Lily entered carrying a bowl of popcorn, stopping mid-step when she noticed the same scene. "You two are acting weird," she teased, her grin bright and mischievous. Laura laughed softly. "We're just trying to remember what it feels like to take care of each other." No one responded, but they didn't need to. The house felt lighter that night, more open, more alive. Dinner stretched longer than usual. Someone cracked a joke, and someone else added to it. Even the quiet moments felt different, comfortable instead of strained. It was like a forgotten warmth had seeped back into the walls of their home. The weeks that followed moved steadily on: school assignments, work deadlines, errands, grocery lists, all the usual demands. But something subtle had changed. A tenderness lingered between Laura and Mark in ways that didn't announce themselves loudly, but threaded naturally through their days. Mark started waking up earlier so he could make Laura coffee before he left for work. Laura slipped handwritten notes into his lunchbox, little reminders that she loved him, appreciated him, still saw him the way she used to when they first met. They found moments to check in with each other, 5 minutes in the morning sun, a few quiet words in the hallway, soft conversations after the kids fell asleep. Tiny moments, but precious ones. Then one late afternoon, everything shifted without warning. Mark's truck didn't pull into the driveway at its usual time. Laura checked the window more than once, listening for the familiar rumble of his engine. She texted him. No response. She called him. Nothing. Her heartbeat quickened with each passing minute. She told herself it was a delay, maybe traffic, maybe extra work at the site. But as the minutes stretched into hours, a cold unease settled in her chest. When the phone finally rang, her hands trembled as she answered. There had been an accident at the construction site. Injuries. Uncertainty. The words blurred together as though her mind